What do you say? Go for it?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah.
I'm working. Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Alberto Accomazzi. I'm the principal investigator of the NASA ADS, and today I would like to kind of discuss the problem of finding experts in for technical publications, review, peer review, etc., and show you how the new ADS interface can help you accomplish these things. So just to state the obvious, why would people want to find experts in general on any given field? Well, obviously, students and graduate students who are looking for a mentor or a PhD program may want to find out who the principal scientists are in a particular area. Researchers often need to pick collaborators to complement their skills or to become part of a team. Editors, obviously, they need to find good referees for any given paper that comes in. And time allocation committees need to conduct peer review on proposals that they have to evaluate. So again, they need to find experts, and we'll shortly define what experts mean. So if I can find the screen.
I think we should go.
Here we go. So I should do present here. Okay, great. So let's start off by defining what we mean by expert. One might say an expert is somebody who's written very authoritative papers on a given topic. And usually we equate authoritative with high citations. That's the typical thing that we do in our fields for a good reason. Or we could say even a smaller subset of these people are people who write review papers about a topic. In order to write a review paper, you need to have a comprehensive understanding of what that field is. So that would be a good person to review any of the papers that discuss a particular subject matter. And finally, you could argue that, well, actually, in some cases, the people who are actively publishing papers on a topic may be the best ones to review a paper who's about the latest discovery or latest techniques in a field. So all of these ways to define expertise have some drawbacks. In the first case, if you are looking for people who have written the most highly cited papers on the topic, that could be people that wrote those papers years ago because citations accumulate over time. So sure, they're experts, but maybe they're no longer involved in that field or they're not up to speed about the topic itself. Someone who has written review papers about the topic, of course, has plenty of expertise, but this reduces the population of potential experts even smaller because there's only so many review papers that people tend to write. And somebody who's actively publishing in the field may be hard to determine. You could find who's writing current papers, but is there a way to tell that this person is in fact an expert and has an understanding of all the intricacies of the field? So who's an up-and-coming, and what is the role of this person? Finally, I think it's also worth mentioning that it's hard to still say that there's just one kind of expert. Depending on the paper, the field, the fact that there's so much interdisciplinary collaborations going on, you have to be careful about how you define these people. So of course, an expert is someone who knows a lot about a particular subject matter. But in some cases, for technical papers, you may want to find a person who is very familiar with a certain methodology or the software used in that paper or sets of papers. Or even people who have worked on the same data sets. So for particular papers, here we go. So people are familiar with the general subject matter, have in-depth field, let's say in-depth knowledge of the overall field, but again, there's not so many of them. People understand methodology and software, have deep technical knowledge, but maybe at the expense of some general understanding of other issues. And people are familiar with data and instrument would be critical to review papers, data release papers, anything having to do with pipelines or surveys or in general a data paper. So what in the context of finding a referee, in addition to the need for the expertise, there's some other considerations. So how do we find a good referee? One way is to look at, for a paper, I'm sorry. One way to do this is to look at the paper in question and look at the list of references. So everybody who's frequently referenced in that paper may be someone who is appropriate to review the paper because clearly he or she has written papers that are relevant. The other approach would be to say, okay, given this paper, I want to find people who are writing things very similar to this because they'll know how to do a decent peer review of this one. And finally, you could say that, well, good referees are those people who read and cite papers similar to this one. Obviously, if they're writing something that is related to this and they're citing this type of work, then it's a good sign. You also have to worry about conflicts of interest, of course. You don't want someone's office mate to review their own paper. And increasingly now that there are large collaborations, you have to kind of spend some time understanding, looking at simply co-location of a person through an institution. Lookup may not be enough because people collaborate across institutions. So the new ADS can help you in many of these regards. Here are some of the things that you can do with our new interface. You could do many of these with the old interface, but I'll show you how some of the new visualizations really help out here. First of all, we can search by topic, and typically we select, we use keywords and concepts to find relevant papers. You can right away see who the primary authors are associated with those papers, so you already have a narrowing of the potential list of reviewers for papers on a topic. You can use visualizations. We'll see shortly how that is done. You can, of course, take advantage of the network of citations and usage indexed in ADS to do some of this more sophisticated second-order lookup of content. And when necessary, you can also, as a reminder, you can use the full-text search of our database if you need to find things that are very specific. For instance, particular instruments or observations. If you want to find all papers that mention them in the full text, now you can. In the demo that I'm about to start, I will make use of the so-called second-order operators or smart operators in ADS. Here's a very brief reminder of how they work. I'm going to just mention these three: useful, reviews, and trending. Let's look at the reviews operator. This is not something that simply picks papers based on whether they appear in review journals like annual reviews of astronomy and physics, but it's an operator that uses the citation network, and it defines reviews as papers that cite a large number of papers that are part of the original query. So we do our subject matter query, and then we look at papers that have a high number of citations to this set of papers. You can also use something different called useful, the useful operator. The useful operator tells you what are the useful papers that you should read if you're interested in a certain subject matter, because those are the papers most frequently cited by the papers on that subject matter. And finally, we have a trending operation that makes use of our anonymous usage indexed in the system. So papers about a topic will be trending if there's a large number of users who have read those papers. So it uses the co-readership information to highlight some of the trending paper according to our anonymous logs. And Mike Kurtz should be thanked for thinking of all of these operators implementing a system. So, time permitting, I'll do 2 longish demos. One where we're going to look for experts about a particular topic, defined by a few keywords. And then a second one where we focus on reviewing a particular paper, which is written by one of our own team members. So we have our victim here. And we will use some of the operators that I discussed and a couple of other ones. So let's see if I can switch. Escape?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Here we go. So, all right. So we had our interface, and to keep the thing simple, I will type in. So I'm typing 3 different keywords. Actually, the person that I was thinking of when I picked these keywords is Bill Foreman, who usually attends these meetings. So I just wanted to find someone who might be able to criticize or tell us how wonderful these features are now that you can search. So I picked 3 keywords that highlight are in common with some of the papers that he's written. And let's look at what's happening. First of all, if you type the keywords without any additional glue between them, it means that we're ending these terms. So we're looking for all the papers that talk about AGNs, active galactic nuclei, M87, and outbursts. And immediately you can see that on the left, we have a list of authors. This is people who have written these papers, and the number next to them is the frequency with which they've written papers. And it's obvious that Bill Foreman is one of the most prolific writers on this topic. So if I further say, okay, let's look at the refereed papers because I'm interested really in the highest quality papers on this subject. There's only 21 of them. And if I had to try to look at not only who are the list of authors, but how they interact with each other, I could look up at the author network. So the author network is a visualization that tells us how that clusters people together based on how frequently they appear in the same author list from the same papers. The clustering algorithm tries to maximize the nearness of people within the same cluster, but clearly some people will collaborate across different groups. And you can visualize this by clicking on this link overlay. So in our case, we saw that Bill Foreman is the person that wrote most of the original papers. And you can see that it belongs to a particular group, collaboration group, but beyond that, he also collaborates with other people who are here clusters in different groups. Again, if you're looking for, if you're trying to understand who good referees would be for a paper submitted by Bill Foreman, you should pay attention to this level of collaboration. But at the first order, we can see that he's part of a large collaboration group that is the purple one. And the papers written by this collaboration group span several years. Here we're looking at 2000 through 2016, probably. The other thing that we can notice is that we can resize this plot based on the citations accumulated by the papers within each group or by the readership in each group. And this gives you different information. Typically, the paper downloads or readership is higher for papers that are more recent, and the citations are older papers that are accumulated, more of these. and otherwise it's simply the frequency of how the author appear. So, okay, so this is what this view does. This is the so-called author network. The first thing I'd like to do is apply the review operator. Reviews. So now we're saying I'm interested in review papers about these topics, and we let the magic begin. So essentially, the papers that we get are papers that frequently cite the list of 41 papers that we were looking at originally. And you see now we have a greater number of papers that come back. They're sorted by score, so the most relevant, according to our definition of relevancy papers, will be at the top. And the list of authors has increased, obviously, because these are papers written by the community. So it's not just the original group of people who were focused on a particular study of AGNs in M87, but it's a lot more people that contribute to this set of papers. At this point, I may once again say, okay, if I'm interested in people who are active now, maybe I want to reduce the list of papers to ones that have been published, say, in the last decade or so, rather than considering all of the papers that were in the original set. So we can apply a first date cutoff. So now we have papers from 2009 to 2019. And then we can explore the author network again and see what happens here. So as you can see, it's a very different landscape. We have Bill Foreman and other collaborators here at the CFA in red. We have a lot of other people who are in outside groups, Andy Fabian. Paul Nolson is actually here, but as you can see, collaborates with other people as well. And then we can play again the same trick of trying to decide who collaborates with whom. Again, if we're concerned about conflicts of interest and reviews, it appears that, for instance, Bill hasn't written papers with, I think that's Brian McNamara, yeah, at least in the past decade. And Brian features highly in this diagram, so he might be a good candidate for reviewing a paper by Bill, for instance. So again, this is just contextual information that can help you decide this. But let's do something different. Let's now apply the other operator, useful. Again, these are papers that are useful in the sense that are frequently cited by the original papers on AGN, M87, and outbursts. And these are the papers that people should read if they're interested in doing research in this field. So this gives, a somewhat different view, but the usual suspects appear still, especially if, yeah, it's not much of a different landscape here. And then for comparison, let's use the trending operator. And trending by design will favor more recent papers because those are the ones that get read most frequently. So as you can see, the distribution is skewed towards more recent papers. The author network should pop up again. And okay, it's somewhat of a different view. So this, in a sense, provides the wisdom of the crowds, what people who read papers on this topic are also reading. It is a long list though, so if you're looking for a way to narrow it down, you of course have at your disposal all the other filters that ADS provides. For instance, if you're looking for somebody, if we're looking for people who have experience with data reduction in a particular field, let's say it's X-ray data, right? One useful thing that you can do is open this filter where we have papers about different data sets. And we could select, for instance, Kesar, Chandra, and XMM as a filter over the literature. So I'm going to say I want all the papers where, which are associated with at least one of these data sets. So all of a sudden, we're down to 1,000 papers. And I could also further restrict this query by saying, not only I want trending papers about this stuff, but I want to require that actually the final list of papers contain one of the keywords of interest to me. So maybe I want AGNs to be part of in the abstract of the final papers. So all of a sudden we're down to a much smaller set of papers. So you can iterate and add more filtering criteria if you're trying to narrow things down. And you see the list of authors also changes as you go along. This guy Ricci, for instance, appears now as a frequent author, and we can go back here and look where he's at. So this is what this person had written. I have no idea who he is. I was hoping the Bill would be here to tell us whether he knows any of these people or not. But you can check about what collaborations he has and whether he could be a good person to review or any of the persons in this group. Okay, and one more example. I think is the use of the similar operator. Here we simply ask what papers are similar to, the papers that discuss AGNs and M87 and outbursts. So if you issue this query, it's the most computationally challenging query right now, because what we end up doing is run the first query, finding the 41 papers in question, then go through the contents of all of those papers, so pick every word in the abstract of those papers, and then look throughout the database for all papers that have the highest frequency of those papers. The reason why the results are still fairly low is because I have all these filter requirements that when removed, let's see, if I were to remove the data filter, we would find a lot more paper in this data set. So just to give you a sense of how wide a selection this provides, and why we may want to do something to narrow it down even further. Again, this is slow because it's something that we should probably try to optimize, but each time we're running very large queries across our database. Let me do this.
Well, let's go ahead. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please, yeah.
So, I appreciate that all these have different qualities, and that you should be aware of what you're searching for. But one thing, it seems to all these tests presume that the papers are comparable at some level. So how do you feel about normalized citations? So you can compare a big group sets of papers versus small group single authors. I feel like a single author is going to be varied by queries like this.
Right. So if we're looking Yeah. Okay. First of all, notice that I did not do a hard. So clearly, one can go here and say, "Give me rank things by citation counts." If I did it now, it would almost be meaningless because we're considering such a large set of results that doing a hard citation count, meaning.
How's that even possible? 1.8 million.
Okay, so that's what I was saying, that the similar operator is the most expensive search that you can do because it finds a list of papers matching my inner query, which is AGN M87 outbursts, pulls all the words from the abstracts of those, and then looks for papers that contain any of those words.
But there can't be 1.8 million papers
Yes,
in the
we have
decade.
13 million papers in ADS, including physics and archive. Yeah. So it's most, if I were to,
Published papers was like 25,000 years.
yeah, so let's narrow it to astronomy, which I hadn't done up until now, because all of these are exploration functions, and so they throw you, okay, 261,000 papers, still a huge number, right?
Yeah.
So what should you do? If you want, and the list of authors is almost meaningless, right? Because here we include authors that, for papers that are maybe may have a very small relevance with respect to the original query. Again, it's 261,000 papers. So
Wait, so how many astronomy papers were published in that decade? Isn't that number something like that?
we're looking for a decade. Yeah. So
It found every paper published.
okay, but watch this. So when you use something like this, clearly you have this problem that the selection is so vast that the whole list is meaningless, but it's a ranked list, right? So I can say, I can now say, I want to see the top 200 papers out of this list. So I could read them going one by one, but here we're just trying to do a little bit of statistical analysis. So if I select the top 200 papers, then I get a very different picture because all the filters that appear on the left and the list of authors, that will be the authors that have published the 200 most relevant papers about this topic as returned by the similar operator. And okay, so right now it found 113 actually because it's applied to, I apply the top 200 to the full list and then I reduce it by requiring refereed and astronomy as a collection. And when it comes back, again, these are expensive operations, so they're slow to return. But when it comes back here, we can look at the distribution of citations of these papers and then do something more sophisticated, which maybe is what you wanted to do, which is let's look at the not just the total citation count, but the normalized citation count, or I think you're talking about the citation rate.
Oh, well, that, I was thinking normalized citation there.
Yeah.
So big groups always have more citations by definition, right?
Yes.
It's a linear sort of thing. So I guess if that was my question was around that issue, was how easy it was to do things by normalized
So you can do normalized citation count, which again will bring up papers where the number of authors is small compared to the total number of citations. And again, this is so slow because of the similar operator is something that we've recently introduced, and so we still have to optimize it. But as you can see, Andy Fabian, who's a famous astronomer, annual review of astronomy and astrophysics. Of course, it's a highly cited paper. He's the only author that's up here, and then the list is much shorter if you go down. The list of authors are much shorter typically.
Just the top line, and that's an outlier.
Yeah.
But like number 5 is sort of reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you can, yeah. this, yeah. We can, so we're really pushing the envelope here in terms of using these follow-up operations, which some of which were designed, the similar operator was originally designed to find, given a single paper, find more that are similar to this. We're applying them to an entire set of papers, and that's why it's so slow.
Yeah, partially doing this on that operator.
Yeah. So let's go. Oops. So we're kind of running over time. I wanted to give one more example, so let me remove this and come to the example of iSpec, which is iSpec is a software package authored by Sergio Blanco Quaresma, who's sitting right here. And I asked him if I could use him as a guinea pig. He said, sure. So this is the case where you already have a paper or maybe an existing paper that is very close to the one that you want to review. Sometimes it happens that people submit to archive and then submit to the journal. So you may have already a paper in ADS that describes exactly the paper, or at least at the abstract level describes something. And you want to find good reviewers for it. So the first thing that we can do, as I mentioned, is people referenced by this paper would be a good list of referees, right? So if I look, this is the list of references in the paper in question. So these people, once you subtract Sergio himself, might be good referees. Okay. Or, if we go back, or we could click on similar papers. Again, this is similarity from text analysis. This will also generate a large list. Still loading. Okay, you see that, yeah, getting the full list is almost meaningless, but if we narrow it down with oops, if I narrow it down with this operator. Useful. Okay, you get the idea. I don't want to wait anymore. But it's the usual suspects. The other thing we can do is trending. That's what we call also co-reads at the abstract level. So these are the papers that are being read by those who read this paper as well. And we'll get a similar list. Again, look at the author network. If we want to exclude Sergio himself and his collaborators from the list of potential referees, it looks like we could pick somebody in this group or elsewhere. So you can select a collaboration group, add it as a filter, and then ask to see the list of papers that are back in that list. Okay, I would like to stop here and basically mentioning that there's multiple ways to explore connections between papers, and then using the, we've only seen one explore function, one of our visualizations, but that is the most appropriate one to use for understanding who works with whom, and potentially eliminate people who might not be good referees for a person. We've also illustrated how, based on a long list of search results, you may want to add additional constraints for reviews that require referees that have worked with particular data sets or data in a particular wavelength. So that was the data filter that we applied. And how you can modify your query to always add additional additional constraints. The most popular ones that used to be done, at least in the old days, was to use keywords. So you could say, in this case, we could add a few keywords to help narrow down the list. The only thing to remember about keywords is that they're mostly going away, and they're not uniform across all publications, although the core astronomy journals have been using the same set of keywords, but now the SS journals will use unified astronomy thesaurus terms, which will be something else that we'll want to introduce in our system. So I'm going to stop here and take any questions if you have any, or any questions about anything else at all. Warren, go ahead.
Would you mind where you have like a little summary of all the commands, right?
Of the operation?
Yeah, the operators.
Okay, so the operators, the best way to look at them are here. So it's under our help pages, we have a quick start page that says, it goes from the very beginning, like how do you do a literature search, topic searches, and then we start talking about these three operators. They're also described, and the visualizations that come from them. The other, I think the other thing that, making a query, smart searches. So this, we also describe, it's a brief list about trending, useful reviews, and top 10. What I showed as the similar operator is not yet documented. It works, but as you can see,
it seems to find every paper.
Yes. So you need to use it in conjunction with some other things, so it's a bit of an advanced.
How much should bake in like top 10% or something of the list?
We may do that. We may do that, or we could, or narrow the way in which it selects terms to then do this follow-up query, because right now it selects everything, but again, it gives you back a ranked list, so if you can always go through.
But yeah, I expect no one on the bottom of that ranked list. So
correct. Yeah.
You could probably return the top.
Yeah.
10% at 20.
Yeah, and it's also it's still slow. So even if we return the top N right now, it would take us long to create that ranked list. So we need to. I would like for it to be not as taxing. System. Other questions? Okay, well, we'll be here for the next hour or so. If anybody has questions related to this or any other ADS topics, we will keep up this office hours through the summer at a lower frequency, though, about once a month. We decided to do it. So you're always welcome to contact us or come here in person or send questions on the web.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you.